This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Hyler.
Hi, I'm Seth.
And I'm Patrick.
Chapter 36, A New Name, and her symbol is the threaded face. For a long time, Elayne sat there, watching Birgitte sleep. It did seem to be sleep. Once, she stirred, muttering in a desperate voice, "Wait for me, Geidel. Wait. I'm coming, Geidel. Wait for..." Words trailed off into a slow breath again. Was it stronger? The woman still looked deathly ill. Better than she had, but pale and drawn. After perhaps an hour, Nynaeve returned, her feet dirty. Fresh tears shone on her cheeks. "I could not stay away," she said, hanging her cloak back on its peg. "You sleep. I will watch her. I have to watch her." Elayne rose slowly, smoothing her skirts. Perhaps watching over Birgitte for a time would help Nynaeve work matters out. "I don't feel like sleeping yet either." She was exhausted, but not sleepy any longer. "I think I will stroll outside myself." Nynaeve only nodded as she took Elayne's place on the bed, her dusty feet dangling over the side, her eyes fastened to Birgitte. To Elayne's surprise, Thom and Julian were not asleep either. They had built a small fire beside the wagon and sat on either side of it, cross-legged on the ground, smoking their long-stemmed pipes. Thom had tucked his shirt in, and Julian had donned his coat, though no shirt, and turned the cuffs back. She took a look around before joining them. No one stirred in the camp, dark except for the light of this one fire and the glow of lamps from their wagon's windows. Neither man said anything while she settled her skirts. Then Julian looked at Thom, who nodded, and the thief-catcher took something from the ground and held it out to her. "I found it, where she was laying," the dark man said, as if it had dropped from her hand. Elayne took the silver arrow slowly. Even the fletching feathers appeared to be silver. "Distinctive," Thom said conversationally around his pipe, and added to the braid. "Every story mentions the braid for some reason, though I've found some I think might be her under other names without it, and some under other names with." Figured I'd leave that there. I really wanted to take it like a whole other page because it's a fun conversation, but I think that sets the scene. Everyone knows.
Totally.
Or
totally.
Thom, Julian, Elayne, and Nynaeve all know that this is Birgitte Silverbow.
I think there's a lot of Thom and Julian character building in this chapter. Just how clever they are. Especially Julian, who's mostly a taciturn character. Like, if you want to get a feel for Julian, really dig into the way he behaves in this chapter. He's very concerned about Nynaeve, even though she's kind of been a jerk to him. He still cares about her and wants her to be okay, and has noticed that there's, like I said, almost suicidal tendencies going on with Nynaeve. She is in a big hole right now.
Yeah, there are some... She's definitely having some issues.
Crippling guilt, yeah.
Before we started recording, I was talking to Kelsey, Namespeaker, just briefly, and we were sort of talking about, or I guess I was talking about how this is a big, important point in Nynaeve's character growth as well. Julian, I'm glad you brought up Julian, because you kind of get to know him a little better over these next few chapters, or a lot better, I should say. But Nynaeve just kind of suffered the smackdown from Egwene in Tel'aran'rhiod, a real blow to her pride, but kind of put her in her place, for lack of a better term, because she's an adult. They're all adult women. Nynaeve isn't her babysitter anymore, and she can't keep acting like that. And also, she's kind of a jerk sometimes, and she needs to moderate that junk. And in the same way, Elayne and Birgitte are about to do that to Nynaeve in these next coming chapters, as she mopes around blaming herself for what happened to Birgitte, when in reality everything that happened was basically out of her control.
Nynaeve is growing up.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, she is missed a bit of her adolescence. She sort of was in charge of these women very early on, and as I think DT makes a very good point, that she's discovered she's far more vulnerable than she thought. We're all immortal when we're teenagers.
Oh, yeah.
And here, Nynaeve is discovering she's not a teenager and she's not invulnerable. And her mistakes can affect other people and affect, especially, Birgitte in this case, but people who are vulnerable.
Yeah, and she gets a dressing down that I was excited about. I think in the next chapter from Birgitte.
I love Brigitte's dress downs.
Yeah. Elayne asks why the men didn't give the silver arrow to Nynaeve, and Julian just kind of says after a long pause, "She seemed upset," Julian said, sucking at his pipe judiciously, and Thom took his from his teeth and blew out his white mustaches. And they're just kind of like, I think, concerned about Nynaeve, concerned about the random naked blonde girl that dropped out of the sky. And I think they know what's going on, or they can guess somehow. And they're very concerned about Nynaeve's mental state right now.
I knew a woman who behaved like this once. She walked around like Nynaeve for half a month. Then she hanged herself.
Yeah.
You know, again, we touch on a lot of sensitive topics, but suicide is one that I don't think gets addressed a lot, especially in fantasy novels. But this sort of overwhelming guilt that maybe you've done something so atrocious you don't deserve to live is just, I mean, it's a terrible weight that Nynaeve has to bear, and one that it takes Birgitte slapping her around a little bit to break her out of. One of the things that makes me really love Nynaeve as a character is this sort of like how much she takes on the guilt that her decisions, guilt of the result of the decisions she makes, and how she's really therefore trying to make better decisions. I think it helps her grow as a character. Absolutely.
I always thought that her I don't know, arc of character growth, or however to say it, how she grows in particular as a character throughout the series is particularly pronounced compared to others.
Yes.
I think only matched maybe by, like, I don't know, Rand goes through a really significant arc, like down and back up again. There's a few other characters I'm sure we could think of, but it's just it gives the story so much more texture for there to be people who are actually learning from their mistakes and, you know, making horrible ones and somehow getting through it.
Right.
In this case, I really don't think this was Nynaeve's fault at all. This was possibly as much Birgitte's idea as Nynaeve's.
Yeah, other than Nynaeve was fighting the Forsaken, and that causes, you know, Birgitte was getting involved.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's not Nynaeve's fault. That's just, there's evil and you have to fight it. Like, that's not your fault. And sometimes in the fight, soldiers fall.
Sure. I understand why her head goes there, why she wants to blame herself, and why she feels guilt. But, you know, Rand's arcs are even worse. But yeah, this is one person who almost died, or, you know, her life may be ruined, although we know it's not. She gets to live her cycle over and over again.
In a lot of ways, Brigitte's redemption and the fact that this doesn't really affect her long term is almost a disappointment for me. I mean, I'm glad. Of course, that's like a soaring moment of triumph when Birgitte comes back. It's one of the best moments in the last battle. But it does take some of the sting away from Nynaeve, and some of this mistake ends up not really being a long-term problem for her or for Birgitte. While there's no way she can know that now, it does sort of, and clearly she grows way beyond it at this point. This looks like, hey, I have destroyed one of the heroes of the Horn. I have, you know, not that she's done it, but she's created a circumstance where one of the heroes of the Horn can be essentially separated from the pattern. And like I said in the previous episode, I do think if Elayne had not saved Birgitte, all that she would have faded into nothingness. I think only by being bonded as a warder and surviving was she able to be reabsorbed back into the pattern.
I agree.
That's just headcanon.
And I was just going to make the comparison to Rand, between Nynaeve and Rand, who straight up murders tons of people, like hundreds and thousands are dead at his hands. And I mean, he goes through a similar thing where, like, was this the right thing to do, or is this what's necessary? And even if it's awful, is it good that and, you know, there's just a lot to it. But they both have to grow into their roles. It's a slow, agonizing process for both of them. And in some cases, slow and agonizing to read them, go through it. But that's what makes us so powerful.
That's why we love Nynaeve.
Yeah.
The characters are what makes this series. It's not necessarily the magic, although it is brilliant, or the Ta'veren, or the bad guys, or the magic system, and all. I mean, the series works on so many levels, but it's the characters that keep bringing me back to the series time and time and time and time again, because the more I examine them, the more they're internally consistent and yet still changing people. And that's such a hard thing to pull off, and I think Jordan does it better than anybody else ever has.
I agree.
And if you don't like the circus chapters, you don't get Robert Jordan. Because these are like, we're barely even into it, and I'm already like just expounding how much I love Robert Jordan. Let's get back to it.
Just a paragraph after the last quotation we were talking about, I'll just read this. Elayne is thinking, they were good men, and she did not like lying to them or hiding things from them, not unless it was absolutely necessary, anyway. Nynaeve claimed that you had to manage men for their own good, but there was such a thing as taking it too far. It was not right to lead a man into dangers he knew nothing of. So, she told them about Tel'aran'rhiod and the Forsaken being loose, about Moghedien. Not quite everything, of course. Some events in Tanchico had been too shameful for her to want to think of them. Her promise held her concerning Birgitte's identity, and there was certainly no need to go into any detail about what Moghedien had done to Nynaeve. And she goes on, but she explains basically everything that had happened, all the things that are really relevant or important for the two men to know that they've so far kept from them.
And how much of it do you think Thom was going like, yeah, I know. Yeah, I know.
Virtually all of it. Maybe he just didn't know that Moghedien was Moghedien and just maybe some black sister that really messed him up, you know?
Sure.
Because I think it's in here, correct me if I'm wrong or if anyone knows, but when the two men hear the name Moghedien, they're just like, oh, holy shit. But for the rest of it, I feel like they're pretty much like, yeah, that sounds right. That sounds, I feel like they already probably had figured out the gist of it. They just didn't know a lot of the specifics.
Well, I'm so happy that Elayne's actually sharing information. It makes me really, really giddy. But Thom is the master of information collecting. So between what he knows about Rand, I forget sometimes he's such in the background, but he knows everything. He's almost as knowledgeable as Varen, in my opinion. He just doesn't have that into the dark side. But in terms of on the light side, he knows as much as anybody about what's going on.
I think so. Yeah, definitely. At the end here, I also kind of want to add on now to flip the page and looked at more of my highlights. But at the end of Elayne's bit here, they too would be hunting Moghedien as well, and that anyone close to them was in danger of being caught between hunter and prey, either way. Now that you know, she finished, the choice to stay or go is yours.
Should I stay or should I go now?
Thom responds, and I'm skipping over a bit, but Thom responds, I haven't taught you half what you need to know if you're to be as good a queen as your mother, he said. You'll not rid yourself of me this easily, child. I mean to see you mistress of Dice Damar, if I must drone in your ear until you go deaf. I haven't even taught you how to handle a knife. Try to teach your mother, but she always said she could tell a man to use a knife if one needed using. Fool way to look at it. She leaned forward and kissed his leathery cheek. You can kiss me too, Julian said dryly. Rand al'Thor will have my guts for fish bait if I don't hand you back to him in the same health he last saw you. And of course, Elayne has a moment in her head where she's like, hand me back.
Man.
But he did make Julian promise. And listen, you promised the Dragon Reborn something. You follow through, man. If he's not crazy yet, he will be soon. Follow through.
It's a good thing he's not uber powerful or anything at this point. Oh, wait.
So I feel like Julian's feelings are perfectly legit, even if Elayne doesn't like it, that he should be afraid.
Oh, can I just do a callback slightly early in the chapter when Thom was like, the best way to shake somebody out of this? Give him a swift kick or else get him drunk and find him a pretty
lady.
A pretty lady. Jordan didn't write prostitute there, but it's one of those things that I absolutely think he was implying. I'm not sure the word prostitute ever appears in the Wheel of Time, but the first two letters of it sure as hell do in that sense.
Yeah, it's all implied, I think. There's dancing girls in seedy taverns, and I don't know. I think it's all implied and not.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. They go up with somebody for a coin. There absolutely are prostitutes, but the word itself does not appear in the series.
Yeah.
So she tells them everything. We're not going to stop hunting.
And they both pledge that they're sticking with it, even though they know Moghedien might be coming after them.
I like how much Thom's like, no, I'm here to still teach you about Days Damar, and like he's giving her all the...
Yeah. Listen, young lady, your lessons aren't done yet. Elayne's like, well, that's not what I was looking for, but I'll take it.
After all that, Thom's like, sounds like her mother, and Julian's like, glad I don't know her, that bitch. Yeah. I love the little side banter between them. It's like... Meanwhile, Thom's like, that's my ex, man.
She heard Thom say, sounds like her mother. And Julian says, then I am glad I have never met the woman. Julian grumbled in reply. Flip her first card? Thom murmured assent. I thought it was slightly notable that Elayne doesn't hide Birgitte's arrow, but she puts it aside in the back of the cupboard. I think she doesn't want Nynaeve to see it or think about it.
Well, she's trying not to remind her of the failure to save Birgitte, and at this point she doesn't even know if Birgitte is going to live. She's still
crying all the time. You got to give the girl a second.
The whole feet being dirty thing is actually, I think, pretty significant. Nynaeve cares deeply about her vanity and her appearance. She'll never admit it, but if you see her walking around without shoes on and dirt on her feet, something's seriously wrong in her head.
I didn't even really think about that, because that's a pretty normal state for me.
Right.
True. But Elayne makes a big deal about it later.
But the wisdom who's all about healing and being a doctor, wash your hand. We see her in Winter Night, even on the attack on Winter Night.
Her hands are clean.
What's the one thing? Her hands are clean.
Because she's been tending the wounded, yeah. She keeps washing her hands over and over.
So she is in a deep, dark hole right now. And Egwene notices. Egwene's like, hey, go fucking take care of yourself. You're not okay.
Yeah. DT asked if she's still walking around in her shift, and I think she actually might be. Just walking around in her shift without any shoes on.
Yeah, because she's inside. She got up.
She went for a walk in the rain or whatever.
And then Elayne's like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. There's no way to get her drunk and find her a pretty young man.
I suppose that's what it would have to be.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly what she says, but I'm not looking at the line.
No, you nailed it. That's exactly what the line is. I thought you were reading it. So that left a swift kick. And honestly, I don't think Elayne does a good job. I think Birgitte is the one who delivers the swift kick that Nynaeve needs. And we see that in the next chapter.
Yeah.
But Elayne takes a shot at it.
Elayne tries. She says, basically, I've had enough of this sulking and self-pity, Nynaeve, she said firmly. You are going to sleep now, and in the morning, you are not going to say one word about what a miserable wretch you are. She says, if you cannot behave like the clear-headed woman you are, I will ask Sarandon to give you 2 black eyes for the one I took away. Now go to sleep. And then Nynaeve is annoyed and grumbling, and Elayne walks over to her and shuts her eyes with her hand, closes her eyelids, and pats her on the shoulder.
Well, don't forget, Birgitte has, the only sleep she's gotten has been Tel'aran'rhiod sleep, which isn't as good as normal sleep, and then she's been up all night.
Yeah.
And stressed. So, I think her body is just, at the edge of its physically what it can do. What do you think? So I know Birgitte appears to be on the edge of death for a solid night, but appears to bounce back from it. Do you think it just takes that long for her to sort of pull enough energy from Elayne? What is it about that? Why is Birgitte fine the next morning when she's not okay tonight? Why doesn't the bonding instantly fix her? Is sort of what I'm wondering about. Why does it take overnight?
The way I perceived it is that, we know that despite Nynaeve's try, which was 100%, she's using undiscovered weaves. She's doing the best job that likely anyone in the world could do to heal anyone, and it doesn't work at all on Birgitte. But, and we've talked about this, Elayne bonds her, and that seems to stabilize her. Elayne bonds Birgitte, and that seems to stabilize her. Although it does take some time, and this is 12 or 24 hours after the event for Birgitte to start coming around. And I assumed that was because, bonding someone, if you're a channeler and you bond someone and they're sick, they're not going to heal instantly, but they will have an edge. They're going to be stronger, better, faster than they were before, but not really inhumanly. You know what I mean? So Birgitte has her grounding point. She's like back in the world. She has a place to be. She's like tied to the earth, so she's not in a dream. Her body becomes real, and it takes her some time for her physical body to recover. Just like you just said, Deviko, because it's just her physical body working now. It's not Weave's. It's her physical body with the one-up of being a bonded warder. That's what I think.
And the healing didn't work because there was nothing physically wrong with her. She just wasn't fully connected to the world. She just wasn't. Her
body was fine, but she was never born. So
right.
It creates a strange problem that I don't really know how to verbalize. I liked what Ogier just wrote here. Perhaps because bonding someone tethers Birgitte to a current thread in the pattern, whereas before she wasn't grounded, as she wasn't supposed to appear yet. Yeah, she was never born. She needed some tie to the physical world.
And I think I made that point last time that she wasn't like woven into the pattern, and the bonding connects her to the Elayne's thread and sort of
I see it as like gives her a place.
Anchors.
And otherwise she's the idea of a woman who happens to be in the real world. You know what I mean? How long does that last? That's the way I see it.
Yeah. Almost everything else that we see that's pulled out from Tel'aran'rhiod into the real world fades immediately into nothing. You know, like there's remember when Nynaeve gets the thorns pulled out of her palms?
But do you remember the thorn stays there as long as it's piercing her palm? When she pulls it out, it disappears.
As long as it's part of her. As long as it's physically part of her. Hey, look at that. Look at that. And that's what we have with Birgitte, is that as long as she's physically, or in this case, bonded magically to Elayne, she doesn't fade from the real world.
Yeah, that seems to make some kind of sense.
Or at least it slows it down. She does eventually get reabsorbed to Tel'aran'rhiod, but almost I would say that's like the natural process as opposed to the simply fading from existence. And my theory always had been if she'd faded away, that would have been it for Birgitte. If she hadn't had time to be reabsorbed by Tel'aran'rhiod.
I'm inclined to agree.
I think Elayne actually saved her whole existence by bonding her as a warder.
So Moghedien's swipe was a real death sentence. It's just that Elayne happened to know this weave, which they didn't have in the Age of Legends. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the warder...
No, absolutely.
The warder weave is new.
Did not exist until the White Tower was founded, which is shortly after the breaking.
Yeah, I think about a lifetime of an Aes Sedai about.
So the next thing I have is Elayne goes to sleep and we get some dreams.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering what you were going to want to say about that. I should probably say off the bat, I'm coming down on the side that nothing here is prophetic, although it appears to be.
I mean, I want to say, as we know, Egwene has almost entirely prophetic dreams. This is Elayne. It's much less likely that these are prophetic and much more likely that she just, again, sort of sees all these women around Rand. And none of them, as we see, she kind of talks about the three main women that do bond him, but like Alana's not mentioned here, but a bunch of women who don't bond him are. Like, I think it's more of her fears than actual prophecy in any way, shape, or form. Because we got to remember who's dreaming. In this case, Elayne, who has, as far as we know, absolutely no tendencies towards being a dreamer.
I want to say zero.
I don't think without the Tel'aran'rhiod, she wouldn't be able to make it to Tel'aran'rhiod. That is a mouthful.
Exactly. I have a little read as Elayne and Birgitte are waking up at the same time, or approximately. Elayne wakes up and Birgitte is awake. And at the end of the dream, Elayne is talking to her, and she's saying, "Where is this place?" And then, "Wake up. This is not Tel'aran'rhiod." Elayne started awake to find Birgitte leaning over the side of the bed, gripping her arm weakly. Her face was too pale and damp with sweat, as if a fever had broken, but her blue eyes were sharp and intent on Elayne's face. "This is not Tel'aran'rhiod." It was not a question, but Elayne nodded, and Birgitte sank back with a long sigh. "I remember everything," she whispered. "I am here as I am, and I remember. All is changed. Geidel is out there, somewhere, an infant, or even a young boy. But even if I find him, What will he think of a woman more than old enough to be his mother? She scrubbed angrily at her eyes, muttering, I do not cry. I never cry. I remember that. The light helped me. I never cry. Elayne got up on her knees beside the woman's bed. You will find him, Birgitte. She kept her voice low. Nynaeve still seemed sound asleep. A small, rasping snore rose from her regularly, but she needed rest, not to confront this all over again now.
Nynaeve doesn't snore. What are you talking about?
Nynaeve doesn't snore. Somehow you will, and he will love you. I know he will. Do you think that is what matters? I could stand him not loving me. Her glistening eyes gave her the lie. He will need me, Elayne, and I will not be there. He always has more courage than is good for him. I always must supply him with caution. Worse, he will wander, searching for me, not knowing what he is looking for, not knowing why he feels incomplete. We are always together, Elayne, two halves of a whole. The tears welled up, flowing across her face. Moghedien said she would make me cry forever, and she... Suddenly her features contorted. Low, ragged sobs came as if ripped from her throat. Elayne gathered the taller woman into her arms, murmuring words of comfort she knew were useless. How would she feel if Rand were taken away from her? The thought was nearly enough to make her put her head down atop Birgitte's and join her weeping.
Poor Birgitte. So glad it worked out for her.
So
I like Birgitte so much.
So glad Nynaeve was asleep for that.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
She did not need that on top of everything else.
No. Not until she accepts that this is out of her control.
But like we said, once again, it's fortunate when Birgitte does die, she is reborn a couple of years younger than Geidel Kane. It ends up working out. She ends up being there for him at the right time, at the right age. So
that's their usual pattern, if I'm not mistaken, right? He's usually born, yes. And then a few years later, Brigitte's born.
She always says she knows her time is coming because she can't find him.
He disappears first.
Tel'aran'rhiod.
Yeah.
And he disappeared shortly before. That's the thing is, like, we saw him in Tel'aran'rhiod, and then maybe a couple of months ago, he disappeared and was reborn. So she knows he's out there as a baby. And she's like, oh God, I'm going to be like this old woman having a crush on a baby. I don't know what the fuck. Like this.
Yeah, by the time he's 20, she'll be 40, and that's kind of an unusual arrangement anyway.
Not as unusual as Elayne sleeping with Thom, but she was willing to do that. So
bigger age gap.
Way bigger age gap. That's all I'm saying. May not have been as big a problem as you might have thought, but yeah, you reset everything when you cut her head off.
Funny because it's not. I think in particular, like a woman being that much older than a man is unusual, very unusual arrangement. Whereas, I mean, in Elayne and Thom's picture, it's a much bigger age gap too. So I guess, yeah, same-ish.
As long as you're all above the age of consent.
As long as everyone is of age and consenting, do whatever you want. You're adults. I don't care.
Just do it in private. That's all I'm asking.
Right. Well, that's part of that. Unless everybody in the room consents.
Yes.
Right. I'm peeling away from this.
I do not consent to be experiencing your sex act.
Fair enough. I mean...
All right. Anyway. And then this quote in particular, she did not drag me in to this by my hair. If she claims responsibility for the consequences, then she claims responsibility for my actions. And again, this keeps bringing me back to Dalinar in Oathbringer. You cannot take my pain. Like, I made these choices. I suffer the consequences. You cannot take responsibility for the things that I've done.
Absolutely.
More than anything else, what makes you an adult is taking responsibility for the consequences of your actions.
She says, I'm a free woman, and I made my own choices. She did not decide for me. I really liked that Elayne responds, I must say, you are taking this better than I would. She could not say better than Nynaeve. That was true, but the other was as well. And one of my favorite Birgitte quotes right here, her response to that is, I always say, if you must mount the gallows, give a jest to the crowd, a coin to the hangman, make the drop with a smile on your lips. Brigitte's smile was grim. Moghedien sprang the trap, but my neck is not yet snapped. Perhaps I will surprise her before it is done. The smile faded into a frown as she studied Elayne. I can feel you. I think I could close my eyes and point to you a mile away. And then Elayne says, oh yeah, by the way, you're my warder.
And like Zach says here, he loves Brigitte's strength. And I agree completely that she comes back from what is essentially lifetime's ending tragedy in a few minutes and is like, well, I'll take her down with me.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be your and if I'm your warder, I'm going to be your fucking warder. Like, I am going to take care of you. I'm going to make sure someone's there to watch your back, and I am going to let you know when you're being a dumbass, which you are right now. Stop being a dumbass.
And we get a couple of quick knowledge drops. Birgitte says, I think I remember hearing a tale of a female warder, but it was in a life so long ago I cannot remember more than that.
I've read a lot of debate about that line.
Yeah?
Because people are saying, oh, well, she remembers all of her lifetimes back to the founding of the White Tower.
Yeah.
So the warder, some people have gotten confused and thought that like that means she must remember warders being older than the breaking, but that's not the case. That she barely remembers hearing about a female warder in some of her earliest lives, which were about 2,500 years ago.
Right.
Which sort of gives us a time frame for like Birgitte sort of doesn't really have memories older than about 2,500 years.
And the Age of Legends was the turning before that, and the horn is from one of the turnings before that. So who knows?
Oh yeah, I mean, my assumption is that she's not just different ages, but through many turnings of the wheel. That she's lived through the Third Age many, many times. I to be honest, never really thought about it, but I always had it in my head that the horn is from the First Age at least, and it may even be much, much older than that. So, see, this is where I think the horn is as old as time itself. I think the horn is inexorably linked to Tel'aran'rhiod and the world, because it's never created, it's only found, it's never destroyed.
But you don't think there's any point where someone made it?
No. I think it was made with the universe. It was made by the creator.
See, I always thought that it was made by people, but so long ago, no one knows how to use this kind of, or make this kind of tool anymore. Many, like, probably turnings of the entire wheel. And it's just been around all that time. That's what I always thought. Again, of course, I have no evidence for it.
Whereas I've always seen the sort of the coils of the horn to be very much like sort of the snake and the wheel coiled together.
It does seem very symbolic, yeah.
And that you sort of have like the horn is the wheel, the horn is Tel'aran'rhiod, that and how do you even get bonded to the horn? The pattern decides, right? So somehow the horn and the pattern communicate. Like, yeah, there's got to be a level of the creator has to control that. Like, what is deciding who
decides who's a hero?
Yeah, who decides who's a hero? Well, the same people who created the horn. The pattern just spontaneously created the horn. I don't know. I honestly think it was. If anything, I think that the horn is a metaphysical object that represents the pattern itself. I think it's more than just a Tel'aran'rhiod. I think it's one of the few things that, like, yeah, sort of you've got Ta'veren, you've got the horn, you've got the heroes of the horn. These are things, you've got the creator who talks to Rand. These are things that exist sort of independent and above the pattern, the Dark One.
I'm laughing at what DT said, so it could have been anything.
Absolutely.
The triangle of Valerie.
I'm guessing the horn takes different forms in different ages.
And this conversation is also where we get Brigitte's offhand comment about an accepted who bonded a warder during the Trolloc Wars. She was sent to go work on a farm for 3 years, apparently, and then the Emerald Seat herself picked who her warder was going to be, not the guy that she picked in the first place, and all that.
And Robert Jordan does one more of his, hey, over time, legends fade to myth, which is, the story is she got stuck with this guy in what's basically an arranged marriage, arranged wardership. And the story says it was this, like, heroic love that the two of them, fought and overcame all these obstacles to be together. And and it's like, the truth is, like, she was a brat and he was assigned to take care of her and they ended up together. Yeah. Yeah. It's like that gets turned into this, epic love story that's just not true in the slightest.
Barachel and Ancelon. Birgitte agrees to keep Elayne's secret that she is not an Aes Sedai and she just bonded someone.
And that's when she says, I am going to be your warder in truth, not just in name. So deal with it.
Yeah. You started it, so.
And Brigitte's idea of what a warder was may be a little out of date. I don't know.
Maybe. I imagine it varies widely. Like, what it's like to be a warder varies very widely depending on the Aes Sedai that you're serving.
And the warder.
Sure.
Not everybody's Batland. I'd love to see, like, a gregarious warder. I think that would be kind of an interesting character.
Huh. Yeah, you don't see that. I'm not sure if Kelsey would be a good warder, a great warder, or a terrible warder, or both. Probably both. I'm going to go with both.
Awful. Good God. Because, like, he doesn't take care of anybody else.
I mean, he sort of does, but then he just disappears for a while and brings home money.
I mean, I guess there are circumstances where he'd be helpful, but no, I can't see him as a warder. Timber says hi. So the one thing, again, a little later in the chapter, that makes me think that perhaps Elayne's dream might be a little prophetic is that she has that dream of bonding Rand over and over and over and over again. But now Birgitte is one of the other women, so maybe, again, it's hard to know with her.
Yeah,
But I just think Rand's so to Viren that maybe, just maybe, that one dream is true.
That she's definitely bonding Rand.
Yeah.
I wanted to believe that some of it was true too, but I was also able to, like, on the other hand, write it off and say, no, this is just what she wants, and it reflects all the things that just happened. Like, she's dealing with all these powerful women, and there are also some women who are thrown in there who are powerful and also beautiful, who she doesn't know as well, and she just is kind of floating through this, like, she wants that to happen, but she feels like she's in competition with all the other young, powerful women in the world, or on some level. You know what I mean? It's just a kind of vague anxiety dream.
I'm nodding. On the other hand, Rand only has one hand. So there is no other hand.
On the other hand, nope.
Simrog burned that one off. No, I totally agree. I'm 100% believe. I'm trying to make it prophetic just because she's having it, but
when you read it, I feel like it's meant to be
uncertain.
Yeah, it's meant to be vague.
So the next morning, Birgitte wakes up hungry because she's been healed, and also has never eaten real food ever in her existence.
Not in this life.
Not in this lifetime.
Nynaeve hastily peeled and cored red pears and yellow apples, sliced cheese, and handed it all to Birgitte on a plate with a cup of watered wine and honey and spices.
Nynaeve starts to be a simpering fool for a little while. Fortunately, it doesn't last very long. But yeah, they disguise Birgitte by dyeing her blonde hair black. Nynaeve's hair is dyed a bright red, and Elayne's is also dyed black. Just in case you were wondering.
And as they wake, the menagerie is preparing to move to their performance area at a nearby small city called Samara.
I don't have a whole lot for this bit, other than Luca shows up and sees Birgitte, and obviously she's a newcomer. He doesn't realize that she's, like, someone they know, and he's like, having a chat with someone from across the river? Get out of here. Shoo. And she's basically like, hey, no, I'm here to work. Like, I'm going to join you guys by shooting. And he kind of laughs at her.
He's like, okay, do you want to paint your face and dress up as a fool? And she's like, not a fool, I'm an archer.
Yeah, because the fools are making money over there. And I do like kind of his summary of, like, it's almost like modern circuses are coming together.
Yeah.
Some woman I've never heard of has 2 women acrobats doing things on a hanging rope that would make the Chimbasa's eyes pop. What are those 2 women doing up there?
It's that silk rope thing. Have you ever seen this?
Oh, yeah, totally.
There's a thick silk rope suspended from the ceiling, and you can, like, climb it, and then you wrap your body and your limbs with the rope in such a way that, like, you can release yourself and pick yourself back up, and you do all these crazy spinning. And
I feel like I would snap my neck, just get my head caught in that thing, and just, like, my body would spin and my head would not.
To say the least, basically no matter who does it, it's sexy. It just... You're
Fair
wrapped
enough.
in silk and doing these, yeah.
I guess if you're strong enough to do it, you're sexy. Because being
Well,
strong
there's that
is
too,
sexy.
yeah.
Yeah.
Suppose if you can do that, then you have the body to do it also, so.
Nodding.
I've seen a bit, but there's definitely, like, there's classes around the city and stuff. I feel like it's kind of, well, I'm probably going to regret this, but I feel like it's kind of like pole dancing light.
Oh, sure.
Like, it's not an obvious pole dance, but it's kind of a pole dance.
The going up and down a vertical thing for using your legs in contortions,
Wrapped in shiny silk and in, like, a workout outfit and, you know.
So they get in the whole, Luca and Birgitte get in this whole bet where he's like, what are you, Birgitte? And she's like, fuck yeah, I am. And he's like, yeah, right. And she does the really cool thing of shooting 2 arrows and then splitting 2 arrows.
Luca says, like, yeah, I'm sure you're a great shot, this, that, and the other thing.
I do like her comment about tall, pretty men being insufferable. I got to agree with that.
He doubts her, and she reiterates, yeah. And she reiterates, I'm an archer, pretty man. Birgitte broke in firmly. Fetch a bow, and I will outshoot you, or anyone you name, 100 gold crowns to your 1.
I also like to point out that most of our main characters are tall, pretty men. Just...
Luca dissembles and this, that, the other thing, and then Birgitte says, are you afraid, pretty man? We can make your side a silver penny. And finally, he's like, fine. He's like, I'm a pretty good shot. I bet I could shoot just as well as anyone else here. And he returns with a bow and some arrows. Birgitte plucked the bow from his hand and walked off another 50 as he stared after her. She shook her head over the bow, but braced it on her slippered foot and strung it in one smooth motion before Luca joined her and Elayne and Nynaeve. Birgitte pulled an arrow from the quiver he held, examined it for a moment, then tossed it aside like rubbish. Luca frowned and opened his mouth, but she was already discarding a second shaft. The next 3 went to the leaf-covered ground as well, before she stuck one point down in the soil beside her. Of 21, she kept only 4. She can do it, Elayne whispered, trying to sound certain. Nynaeve nodded bleakly. If they had to pay out 100 gold crowns, they would soon be selling the jewelry Amathera had given them. The letters of rights were all but useless. As she had explained to Nynaeve, their use would eventually point a finger to where they had been for Elaida, if not where they were. I had just spoken up in time. I could have stopped this. As my warder, she has to do as I say. Doesn't she? From the evidence so far, obedience was no part of the bond. Had those Aes Sedai she had spied on made the men give oaths as well? Now that she thought of it, she believed one of them had. Birgitte knocked an arrow, raised the bow, and loosed, seemingly without pausing to aim. Elayne winced, but the steel point struck dead center, in the middle of the carved white cross. Before it stopped quivering, the second brushed in beside it. Birgitte did not wait a moment then, but only for the 2 arrows to still. A gasp arose from the onlookers as the third shaft split the first, but that was nothing to the absolute silence, as the last split the other just as neatly. One could have been chance. Twice? Luca looked as if his eyes were coming out of his head, mouth hanging open. He stared at the tree, then at Birgitte, at the tree, then Birgitte. She proffered the bow, and he shook his head weakly. Suddenly, he flung the quiver away, spreading his arms with a glad cry. Not knives, arrows, from 100 paces! Nynaeve sagged against Elayne as the man explained what he wanted, but she made not one sound of protest. Thom and Julian were collecting money. Most handed over coins with a sigh or a laugh, but Julian had to snag Latel's arm as she tried to slip away and speak some angry words before she dug coins from her pouch. So that was what they had been up to.
That's insider trading. They knew she was Birgitte from the legend. That's insider trading.
She would have to speak to them firmly, but later. Nana, you don't have to go through with this. The woman only stared at Birgitte, eyes haggard. Our wager? Birgitte said when Luca ran out of wind. He grimaced, then fished slowly into his pouch and tossed her a coin. Elayne caught the glint of gold in the sun as Birgitte examined it, then tossed it right back. The bet was a silver penny on your part. Luca's eyes widened in startlement, but the next moment he was laughing and pressing the gold crown into her hand. You are worth every copper of it. What do you say? Why, The Queen of Gildan herself might come to see a performance such as yours. Birgitte and her arrows. We will paint them silver. And the bow. Desperately, Elayne wanted Birgitte to look at her. They might as well put up a sign for Margedian as do what the man suggested. But Birgitte only bounced the coin on her hand, grinning. Paint will ruin an already shabby bow, she said finally, and call me Marian. I was called that once. Leaning on the bow, she let her smile widen. Can I have a red dress too? Elayne heaved a sigh of fervent relief, and Eve looked as if she were going to sick up. I love that she wants a red dress too, for no reason.
She thinks it's
like,
sexy.
Hey, she got a dress. Do I get one of those?
Yeah.
Well, yes, for that reason, but not because it's important to the performance or anything. Like, I understand why Luca was like, the girl in danger and distress, like, should be kind of dressed in a sexy way. Like, it's the thing. It's what people are looking for with this act. But the person shooting doesn't really need to be. Although I can't say that would drive anyone away. That's right,
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Birgitte is entirely 100% okay with flaunting her body and is happy to show it off.
Yeah. I feel like Birgitte has, like, no body image issues. She's like, yeah,
Which is very much a contrast with the Two Rivers folks who have nothing but body image issues. I don't know about body image, but so much as body sharing issues.
Yeah, she's not embarrassed. I don't actually think that she just thinks that she's hot, although it's funny to say out loud. But she has no problem just with people seeing her. She's the Avienda to body image issues. Yep, that's what I look like. Moving forward.
Tall, blonde, and gorgeous. Also damn good with a bow, smart, fun. I may or may not have a crush on Birgitte.
I do a little bit.
It's a shame she's fictional.
That's true, Zach. Birgitte has had many, many centuries to figure out how to stop worrying about this.
Oh, yeah.
And lived in many different cultures who probably either did or did not have weird body stuff.
And knows who she loves, too. She loves Guidal Kane. She doesn't have to, worry about finding true love. She's had it. She knows what it is. She's born knowing true love.
This time, anyway. I agree with you, Kelsey. I have learned that when I go around the house, I make a round, at least once a week, and just go over everything, touch all the soil, do little trims here or there, whatever. Julia's succulents often don't need any attention She has a bunch of succulents on her desk rather than I have, a bunch of small trees. But they don't need any attention it's usually maybe every other, and I just miss them, and that's all they want. But one of them we bought that came in a little plant pot the size of a quarter, and it's just a leaf sticking out. And the thing is now a foot and a half long. It's just snaking all over her desk. I think I'm going to try to cut it and replant half of it or something, because it's out of control. And she bought this little plant pot that's I don't know, maybe the size of a phone, if it was a phone cubed, like a regular iPhone or something. It's not a big pot. It's sticking roots out, looking for soil all over the wooden desk.
That I found, if I really want my plants to be healthy, repotting them is key to giving them enough room to continue to grow, giving them fresh nutrients. Repotting into a bigger pot is I understand what it takes to keep a plant alive. I just don't, devote the time.
Oh, hey, what? You just made me think of sometimes when I'm having a problem, well, particularly with my roses or outdoor things, I like to go visit. There's a young lady that works at a nursery. It's on like 30th in Alberta. I forgot the name of it, but I could find it on my phone if I needed to. But it's in the 30s on Alberta, and she works there, and she's given me a lot of really good advice. I spent a bunch of time trying to grow a deciduous tree inside because I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. If I could have like an oak tree in my living room, and they all died no matter what I did. And in passing, I was there one day just looking at plants, and she struck up a conversation with me about, what I wanted and stuff. And she told me that it's basically what you're trying to do is impossible. There is no deciduous plant that will grow inside. She was like, if you're real good at what you do, you could maybe keep it alive for 3 or 4 years, and then they'll die. Because they don't get to sleep, basically. It would be like, oh, yeah, tree to winter is nap time to humans.
So you need to throw a blanket over it for the winter.
Well, it needs to get cold and freeze. It needs to stop production. Otherwise, it'll burn itself out. And I did not know that. I didn't understand that. Yeah, it's got to get down to the 30s or 40s for those trees to be okay. So,
I mean, I guess what you could do is just stick it outside in the winter.
Yeah, that's the only option.
If you had it in a pot, yeah, is bring it inside. And I think my dad used to do that a lot. He had, again, my dad is a master gardener, so he had a whole system where he'd certain pots were inside. He did starts early on in the year. There was a whole summer, winter
rotation.
Cleaning up rotation, of all the plants, and then of course daily waterings, weekly trimmings. Growing up, my house was a freaking garden, and one of the things that I love my parents, and I grew up in this house that was spotless, large, and extremely well taken care of, and my parents never fucking sat down for a minute in their lives to do it. And I just never want to live that way. There was so many things for them to maintain to keep the house in ideal condition that they get home from work and work for another 4 hours.
Yeah.
And I was just I don't understand why you do this to yourselves. There's so much high maintenance shit in this house. You'd never get to relax and read, because all I wanted to do was relax and read. And of course, I'm sitting around relaxing and reading, and they're working their asses off. They're like, "Get up, you lazy bum!" And I'm like, "Why are you doing this? You're mopping a floor that's clean."
My mom was kind of like that. Mommy, mop that floor yesterday. It's not. There's no way.
If you see a spot, wipe it up.
But her house will always be cleaner than my house. Yeah, that's a lot more like that.
Yeah,
I'll mop the whole house maybe twice a month, probably once, but just spot clean. Don't rub the dirt in. And it's just me and Julia here too, so we don't do a lot of damage.
Right. Pets definitely make that a little harder.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
because they are constantly bringing in dirt
and hair
there's
everywhere.
A level of dirt and hair. Yeah, and hair. And we had birds, and they were just, I don't know if you've ever
they spit seeds and shit. Yeah.
Just because they're bored, they'll throw fucking food. And my mom fed them fruit and, things that could rot, basically. Not just seeds and shit. And so, because parrots will eat like humans. They're omnivores. They can eat most of what we eat. And so, but they throw that shit everywhere. And they're used to being in a forest where they just eat in abundance, and whatever they don't eat falls out of their mouths onto the ground and becomes food for ground-dwelling animals. Well, in a house...
You're the ground-dwelling animal.
Yeah, you gotta clean that shit up. And there's a lot of shit to go along with it,
Yeah, that's why I always thought it would be so very pleasant to have a bird singing when I wake up in the morning, but just the maintenance, I'm aware, is hard.
And parrots are not birds. They are not singing. They are screaming.
Yeah. I was thinking little, sparrows or something would be nice, but I don't have the time.
And I get having a cage full of finches that can kind of chirp, but they can also just be super fucking loud. It's not like you can turn it off.
Yeah.
And I'm so against caging flying creatures. It just seems like
that too.
It's just a tragedy. It's just a tragedy. And birds aren't domesticated.
It's cool. I can just put nature sounds on my tablet and leave it around the apartment.
But as I've said before, and I'll say again, eventually Harper, my the blue and gold macaw my parents own will pass to me, and she loves me, so I'm not ever gonna. I wouldn't feel right giving her up. Like, I don't feel like she'd have a better life anywhere else than with me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, she's gonna outlive me. So once I get her, she's mine for life.
They live to like 80 or 90, right?
Right. And I've heard everything from 60 to 80, but, you know, she's 10 years younger than I am. So I'm hoping to live to 60 to 80.
Unless you get to 100, there's no way you're going to...
No.
Yeah. I don't know what I'll get to. I have pretty good genes for it, though. Most of my grandparents made it. I mean, they all made it into their 80s, but some made it almost to 100.
The smoking is the worst thing for you.
Yeah.
It's the most likely to...
The one that didn't make it to her 80s smoked like a chimney.
Yeah.
I think she died at 79, actually.
My grandparents died relatively young, but all from, like, non-natural causes. Right? Like, my grandmother died in childbirth with my dad, so that, like, isn't really a predictor for anything.
Yeah.
And then his father committed suicide shortly thereafter.
Jesus.
So, yeah, that's my father's history, by the way. That's why he was raised by his aunt and his uncle, and he thought his aunt and his uncle were his actual parents. They thought because his father was basically an out-of-control drunk for a bunch of years, and so they just told him that was his uncle, but it was actually his father.
I've told you before, my dad actually has a similar story. He was adopted from inside the family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have talked about
that. Who I referred to as my grandma she was the one that smoked like a chimney. It was actually my great aunt. And she just decided one day, she was like, you two need to get your shit together. I'm taking your kid, and when you sober up, you can have your son back. And they never did. She just raised him to adulthood.
Yeah.
Golden generation, man. They were different.
Well, and it was just, I think with my grandmother having died, I don't think my grandfather could, like, deal with my father. You know, like, that was just he was a single dude in the 40s, right? Like, you know, and
reflect on my dad's story, that's kidnapping. You can't do that. That's technically...
Fair. Yes, technically.
But it was a different time, and I bet that if that had gone to court at the time, the judge would have been like, yeah, you should sober up.
and I'm guessing it happens more often than people would like to admit, that when you have someone who's just has kids and is totally incapable of taking care of them, that somebody in the family steps up and takes over.
Yeah. And she already had several, so she just had to throw one more into the basket, you know?
I'm guessing if you don't argue, like, you say, yeah, this is my kid, you know?
Yeah, you don't argue with that lady either. She was, well, mean, but at appropriate times. She was a fighter, for sure.
You know, as they say, there's no test to qualify you to create a child. A lot of people who shouldn't have children create them, and it takes a good person to fix that situation.
Say, making babies is really fun. The rest, that's hard. That's really hard work. Unending and thankless. Anyway,
stop smoking.
Yeah, well, just vaping now. At least.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, I haven't actually smoked a real cigarette in quite a while now, like half a year.
Congratulations, man. I know you were, like, trying to do that, but...
Yeah.
You hadn't mentioned that you were sticking with... Because, you know, I know you've gone back and forth a few times.
Oh, a bunch of times, yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad this one's sticking.
Yeah, I just have the Juul. This is not an endorsement, but... I mean, it got me to smoke this rather than cigarettes. It's similar, and once I tried it, I was like, it feels a lot cleaner. Like, if I, like, have some drinks and smoke a lot of cigarettes on a bar patio or something, I used to wake up in the morning and, like, feel it, you know? Like, ooh, I smoked too much last night. With this, I don't really.
Yeah, I'm firmly on the side of vapes being safer than cigarettes.
I think they're definitely safer.
There's a couple of things that you don't want to be inhaling that they put into the black market, like heavy smoke. If you like want to generate a bunch of like white smoke, that shit's bad for you.
Oh yeah, I've read recently, because I was concerned when people were like dying from vaping. It's like, Jesus, what's this now? Like, is this more dangerous? Then should I switch back to freaking Marlboros? But it looks like it was mainly the black market stuff, like you said. People reload their own cartridges because it's cheaper, but they reload it with stuff that's not the right grade, and that can harm your lungs pretty badly.
And a lot of times they just have additives in it to make it thicker or make the smoke thicker, and that's really Yeah, and still, as Painted Dead said, even if everyone was smoking this shit, it's still... Well, the one thing we do have to be careful about is we don't know about long-term vaping effects. Like, it's one of those things where we are doing a relatively short-term experiment on ourselves, but because the alternative is smoking cigarettes, which is so fucking bad for you, it makes sense that, like, hey, vaping, which is probably safer, is worth the risk. What's not worth the risk is getting new people addicted on vaping who haven't been smoking cigarettes, and that's something we need to be careful about.
Yeah.
But if you can get off cigarettes, absolutely, it's 100% worth it. So, I think I think we're going up to 21 in Oregon. I think there's a lot for getting a vape, which I think is great.
Yeah, you have to be 21 to buy any kind of tobacco product.
Yeah.
Vapes or cigarettes or any tobacco.
We need to do it right, but it is a better thing than smoking cigarettes, in my opinion. And I'm happier to be around people smoking a fucking vape pen than smoking cigarettes. I'm much more likely to hang out with a group of smokers.
Another thing that sold me is that my clothes don't stink. That's nice.
Well, not a cigarette smoke anyway.
If I'm like pressed for time and I'm like in a big building, I can like dip into the bathroom really quick and take a couple drags and go back out and feel fine. And nobody's going to smell it. You can't. Once that vapor dissipates, there's no way to detect it. Also, not an endorsement. Don't do that, guys. I'm pretty sure that's illegal, but I do occasionally. I don't know. Cut that, maybe? I'm not sure.
Sure, yeah. It was definitely worth it to... I mean, working in a kitchen, I definitely have a vape pen with me, and I've got big fans, so you just... Also cutting this, but, it's very easy to take a hit of the vape and then just blow the little bit of vapor that comes out right into the big fans, and
oh god, back in the day,
no one even fucking notices.
I used to do that with my coworkers with real cigarettes.
right, yeah. So like
so
you
bad.
can kind of, like those are fucking incredible fans.
Yeah,
they're designed to pull out all the smoke and steam that you produce when you're cooking, and keep that from getting out into the rest of the restaurant. I'm surprised you can get away with cigarette smoke, but I'm not shocked that you did it a few times.
Oh yeah, we did it. It was mainly after a shift, but I think there was a time or two where it was during, and it's really, it was a huge kitchen. It was an enormous space, which makes a really big difference. So it was like, it was also in a line of like, there were several hoods in the kitchen, and this one was in the middle, and people would go to that one. It's really hard for anything to escape. Because all the hoods are going at the same time, and there's a flat under each of them.
Lot of air movement.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or
support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?